in a quiet, sun-drenched village in West Africa, nestled between golden savannas and whispering trees, lived a family known for their kindness. The father Kofi was a hard-working farmer, respected by all for his honesty. The mother Ama cared for the village children and tended their small home with boundless love. Despite their modest life, they were rich in spirit and happiness, but their joy was often shadowed by the temperament of their only daughter. Abina was beautiful, with sparkling eyes and a confident stride that made her the center of attention. Yet, her beauty was matched only by her arrogance. From a young age, she demanded luxuries her parents could never afford. She scoffed at her mother's hand-woven clothes and looked down on the other children. Even though Kofi and Ama showered her with love, Abina believed affection wasn't enough. She wanted admiration, prestige, and treasures beyond her reach. Her days were spent strutting through the village, wearing bright fabrics gifted by traveling merchants, flaunting her small jewelry collection, and boasting about imaginary friendships with people from faraway towns. Her friends, mostly girls from wealthier families, fed her vanity. They would laugh at jokes about her parents' humble lifestyle, and Abina always laughed the loudest. Kofi often sighed, hoping she would one day learn that the wealth of the heart mattered more than gold. Ama prayed silently, wishing her daughter's pride would be softened by experience. The villagers, though fond of Kofi and Ama, whispered among themselves about Abina. She will face sorrow if she does not learn humility, they would say quietly, afraid that telling her parents openly might only cause them pain. Abina, however, remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in the hearts of those around her. She treated every word of advice as a lecture from fools who couldn't possibly understand her greatness. One bright morning, a wealthy merchant named Mensa came to the village, seeking the finest crafts for his city home. He was impressed by the diligence of Kofi's farm and the meticulous handiwork of Ama, yet his eyes were drawn repeatedly to Abina. With a polished tone, he commented, "Your daughter carries herself with such elegance. Surely she could live in comfort among the wealthy and travel the world." Abina's eyes gleamed. Here was the recognition she had always craved. "Of course," she said proudly. "I am meant for more than this village. I deserve riches, respect, and admiration everywhere I go." Kofi smiled politely, but he couldn't hide his worry. Ama pressed her hand to her heart, sensing the lure of pride that so often leads young hearts astray. But they couldn't control the desires burning in Abina's mind. That night, as the fire crackled and shadows danced across the walls of their humble hut, Abina dreamed of palaces, shimmering dresses, and crowds of people bowing to her beauty. In her dreams, she could hear applause that never ended, and the taste of wealth was sweeter than any food she had ever eaten. Her parents watched silently, knowing the path ahead was uncertain. They could see the seeds of shame and pride intertwining in her heart, a dangerous mix that could bring them all sorrow. They whispered prayers into the night, hoping that humility would find its way into Abina's life before it was too late. The next day, the village children gathered near the river to play. Abina walked past them, her nose raised in disdain. "Why do you all waste your time playing with sticks and mud?" she asked. "Don't you see that greatness isn't born in the mud? One day, I will leave this place, and none of you will matter to me." The children stared, a mix of fear and pity in their eyes. Even the elders shook their heads, murmuring, "The daughter of Kofi and Ama walks a dangerous path." Though Abina felt untouchable, the universe has a way of balancing pride with lessons. Little did she know, the very qualities that made her the envy of some would soon make her the object of a harsh reality. Her journey toward arrogance and vanity was just beginning, and the first steps are often the hardest to recognize. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with shades of crimson and gold, Abina sat outside her hut, dreaming of a life far grander than the one she had. Meanwhile, her parents quietly observed, their hearts heavy with both hope and dread. They knew that love alone might not save their daughter from the consequences of her pride. Somewhere, in the near or distant future, humility would knock at her door, but whether she would open it remained uncertain. And so, the story of Abina, the spoiled daughter who had yet to learn the value of respect, honesty, and humility, began a tale of beauty, arrogance, and the harsh lessons that only life can teach. Thanks for watching our story today. If you enjoyed it, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more tales from around the world. We'll see you in the next one. City lights shimmered like distant stars as Abina stepped from the rickety village path onto the bustling streets of the nearby town. Everything here felt larger, louder, and more dazzling than her quiet home. Merchants called out from their stalls, selling silks, spices, and glittering trinkets. The air smelled of roasted nuts, firewood, and ambition. For Abina, this was a playground made for her dreams. She could almost hear the applause of invisible crowds cheering her arrival. Soon she caught the attention of a wealthy family living in a towering house near the market square. Their son Kojo, a young man dressed in finely woven robes, noticed her perfect posture and the confidence that radiated from her every movement. Smiled, intrigued. "You seem different," he said. "Rarely do I see someone carry herself with such certainty." Abina's heart leaped. Here, finally, was someone who recognized her worth. She laughed softly, a sound that turned heads. "I have always known my value," she replied, her voice smooth and proud. "Tease. It is not for the world to question." Her eyes sparkled, and in that moment, she believed the city had been built just for her. Days turned into weeks, and Abina's charm and beauty made her a favorite among the town's elite. She was gifted expensive dresses, adorned with jewels, and invited to banquets that seemed more like royal courts than mere dinners. She walked through marble halls, laughing at the simplicity of those who couldn't afford the luxuries she now wore. Pride swelled in her chest like a beating drum. The villagers she once knew humble, honest souls were now distant memories, barely crossing her mind. But with every whispered compliment and every bowing glance, Abina's arrogance deepened. She began to speak harshly, even cruelly, to those who served her. A young merchant who offered her a hand-carved necklace trembled under her gaze. "Is this all you have?" she mocked, tossing the necklace aside. The merchant's face fell, but Abina didn't notice. To her, it was the natural order. She deserved the best, and the world must bend to her will. Then came the day that would mark the beginning of her shame. During a grand celebration in the town square, Abina insisted on leading the dance. Her steps were exaggerated, her gestures commanding, as she flaunted every dress, every jewel, every ounce of her beauty. The crowd initially applauded, but soon, whispers began. "Who is she to think herself above us? Such arrogance will bring her ruin." Abina, blinded by vanity, just laughed louder, demanding more applause. It was then that the mayor, a wise and observant man, approached her. His eyes, sharp and calculating, saw through the charm to the fragile pride beneath. "Young lady," he said sternly, "the world has many mirrors, but not all of them will reflect your greatness. Arrogance often blinds even the brightest eyes." Feeling both insulted and challenged, Abina raised her chin. "I do not need mirrors or words of caution. I am what I am. Let anyone who cannot see my worth fade into the shadows." But fate, subtle yet unforgiving, had begun to circle her like vultures above a feast. The very people who had admired her beauty and poise now grew tired of her haughty demeanor. Invitations dwindled. Sport. Compliments were replaced with cold nods. Whispers of disapproval spread, first quietly, then openly. Even Kojo, once enchanted by her, began to notice her cruelty. "She has forgotten kindness," he murmured to a friend. "And arrogance often invites misfortune." Abina, still lost in her vision of grandeur, failed to see the cracks forming around her. The city, which had seemed a stage built for her, began to feel like a cage. Doors that once opened to her now closed quietly. Friends turned their backs. The laughter that once echoed in her ears faded, leaving only silence and the echo of her own vanity. In the quiet of her lavish room that night, Abina looked at herself in a gilded mirror. She expected to see triumph, yet the eyes staring back were not filled with pride, but tension. A faint shadow of doubt flickered across her face, the first spark of realization that the world might not bend forever to her will. But it was fleeting, drowned by memories of applause and jewels. She told herself, soon they will all bow again. They cannot resist me. Little did she know, the seeds of disgrace had been planted. Pride, unchecked and untempered, had begun to invite the lessons that life demanded. The city, once a playground of luxury, was quietly preparing to teach her that beauty and wealth alone could not shield a heart from shame. And the first cracks in her seemingly flawless world were already widening, invisible yet inevitable. The sun rose over the city in a breathtaking cascade of molten gold, but its warmth offered no comfort to Abina. For her, the city had grown cold. The laughter that once echoed through grand halls, following her every move, had fallen silent. The stream of invitations, once endless, had dried up completely. People she had counted as friends, those who had once showered her with praise, now averted their eyes, their gazes sliding past her as if she were a ghost. Even Kojo, a young man whose open admiration had always brought a small smile to her face, no longer looked at her with that familiar warmth. "You have forgotten how to see others, Abina," he said, his voice quiet, his eyes fixed on the distant rooftops. "Kindness and respect. They matter more than every jewel you wear." Abina, so unaccustomed to being challenged, felt a sharp pang of anger mixed with a bewildering confusion. "I am who I am," she whispered. The words meant more for herself than for him, a desperate attempt to shore up her crumbling reality. "I don't need anyone to judge my worth." But whispers, she was learning, have a formidable power. The merchants who once fell over themselves to flatter her now spoke in harsh, critical tones the moment she passed. The servants she had treated with such scorn no longer rushed to fulfill her every whim. Doors that had once swung open at her mere approach now slammed shut in her face. The very pride that had been her impenetrable shield had warped into a cruel mirror, reflecting back only her profound and growing loneliness. The final, shattering blow came from a place she least expected it. A friend she had trusted, a girl from a prominent, wealthy family, invited Abina to an exclusive gathering. She promised laughter, admiration, a return to the world Abina missed so desperately. But when Abina arrived, dressed in her finest silk, the boisterous room fell into an immediate, deafening silence. The smiles she saw were not of welcome, but of mockery. She realized, with a sickening lurch in her stomach, that the invitation had been a lie, a carefully constructed trap designed for her public humiliation. Guests stared, their whispers like the hissing of snakes. Cruel jokes, just loud enough for her to hear, cut through the silence. And for the very first time in her life, Abina felt the searing, unbearable sting of true shame. A desperate urge to flee, to vanish from the hundreds of mocking eyes, seized her. But the corridors were crowded, trapping her. And every frantic step she took seemed to echo her humiliation through the grand hall. Her chest felt tight, her breath catching in her throat, as a cold, undeniable realization washed over her. Beauty had never been enough. Her elegance, her expensive jewels, her exquisite dresses, they were useless armor against the scorn she had earned, the inevitable consequence of replacing humility with arrogance. She fled the party, her silk gown, once a symbol of her status, now dragging pathetically in the dust. Tears, hot and shameful, carved tracks through the perfect makeup on her cheeks. The city she had once adored now felt like a labyrinth of mockery. Every alleyway, every balcony, seemed to hold a reflection of her own hubris. Days bled into weeks, and Abina's world, once so vast and glittering, shrank to the size of her own solitude. Her wealth, she discovered, was powerless. It could not buy back the friendships she had so carelessly burned. Luxury could not fill the gaping emptiness that had opened up inside her. Even the families and merchants who had once fawned over her now treated her with a polite, chilling distance. She had become a shadow, a ghost haunting the memory of the girl who had once believed herself untouchable. Hungry, for the first time in her life, shivering from a cold that had nothing to do with the weather, Abina found herself in a quiet, forgotten alley behind the market. The walls were dark with soot, the air thick with the smell of refuse. A bitter irony struck her. She had once scorned those who lived in humble homes, laughed at those with dirt-stained hands, and dismissed the simple joys they found in their lives. Now, it was she who trembled before the harshness of reality, stripped of all her finery. Her thoughts turned to her parents, Kofi and Amma, back in her home village. The whispers of the elders, words she had long ignored, returned to her with piercing clarity. Pride invites shame. She had dismissed their guidance, their quiet lessons on kindness, their gentle prayers for her to have a good heart. Now, she understood. The world had answered her arrogance, not with whispers, but with the harsh, unforgiving voice of experience. The laughter she had cherished was gone. The respect she had demanded had fled. Even the love she thought the city unconditionally offered her seemed distant, invisible, and impossibly cold. One night, sitting alone on a weathered bench under the weak, flickering light of a street lantern, Abina finally allowed herself to weep. These weren't the shallow, frustrated tears of a spoiled girl. These were deep, soul-cleansing sobs of pure grief. She mourned the loss of her friends, the vast chasm she had created with her arrogance, and the life of comfort and admiration she had so foolishly believed she deserved. She saw it all so clearly now. Her pride hadn't just isolated her, it had systematically stripped away every piece of joy she had once taken for granted. But in the depths of that despair, a faint ember began to glow, a tiny spark of understanding. Humility. That was the missing piece. It had been absent from her life for so long, and in its absence, shame had been allowed to fester and take root. She remembered her parents' love, so quiet and unwavering, and felt a profound twinge of regret. How foolish she had been, thinking the world owed her admiration simply for being beautiful. How blind she had been to simple kindness, to mutual respect, to the invisible threads of connection that truly hold a life together. As the first light of dawn broke, touching her tear-stained face, Abina rose from the bench. She knew, with a certainty that was both terrifying and liberating, that her journey was far from over. The city, in its own cruel way, had taught her a lesson she could never unlearn. Pride is fragile, and arrogance is a treacherous friend. She had to face the consequences of her actions, accept the pain she had invited upon herself, and begin the painstaking work of rebuilding the bridges she had so carelessly demolished. As she walked back through the empty, waking streets, the morning wind seemed to whisper around her. It was a sound that was both a warning and a promise. Humility would find her, whether she sought it or not. And in that moment, for the first time, Abina felt a strange mixture of fear and anticipation. The path ahead was uncertain, harsh, and lonely. But perhaps, just perhaps, she was finally ready to confront herself. The city's cold winds cut through Abina's thin dress like invisible knives. She had nowhere to sleep, nowhere to hide. The glittering halls and marble floors she once danced on were now only a memory, a cruel reminder of what pride had taken from her. Each step she took along the cracked streets reminded her that the world did not bend to vanity. Her stomach growled with a hollow pain that no jewel, no dress, no applause could ever fill. Abina sank against a crumbling wall, shivering under the faint light of a flickering street lamp. Hunger gnawed at her, sharp and relentless, as if reminding her that life demanded humility before sustenance could be found. She watched rats scurry past, gathering scraps she couldn't even imagine touching. The irony burned her more than the cold. She had once scoffed at those who lived in need, at those who worked with calloused hands, at those who had nothing but honesty in their hearts. And now, she was them. Memories of her village flashed in her mind, her mother's gentle hands preparing food, her father's quiet advice, the laughter of neighbors she had mocked. She remembered how she had teased children who played with mud, how she had turned her nose up at villagers who could not afford fine clothes. Every flash of pride now felt like a cruel chain, binding her in the shadow of her mistakes. Tears welled in her eyes, but hunger would not wait for tears. Her body ached, not just from cold and starvation, but from the realization that her life had been built on illusions. Each day she scavenged scraps from trash heaps, begged silently for water, and huddled in alleyways to avoid the judgmental eyes of strangers. Yet, even in her suffering, she began to hear a voice. She had long ignored the voice of her conscience, soft but insistent. Pride blinds, it whispered in her mind. You believed beauty and wealth could shield you from reality. But humility is the true armor of the heart. Only when you respect others and yourself can you endure life's storms. Abina trembled. The words were unfamiliar, uncomfortable, almost painful. She had been taught to seek admiration, to command attention, not to listen to inner whispers of morality. And yet, the more she heard the voice, the more she understood it. For the first time, she admitted that she had been wrong. That she had hurt people she never realized she depended upon. That her parents' quiet love had been her true wealth, one she had squandered in pursuit of vanity. Night after night, she lay under the stars, the cold soil pressing against her, and thought about the life she had lost. She remembered the merchant who had flattered her, the girl who had betrayed her, the friends who had laughed at her arrogance. And slowly, painfully, she began to forgive herself not for her pride, but for her ignorance. She realized that arrogance is born from innocence, misdirected, and that even the most spoiled heart can learn if it listens. Hunger sharpened her senses. Pain made her think clearly. Loneliness forced her to reflect. The world that once seemed a stage for her triumph now became a classroom, harsh and unyielding, where every lesson was delivered through experience. She learned to value a cup of water more than applause, a kind word more than jewels, a simple smile more than admiration. Then came the moment that changed everything. While searching for food near the market, she encountered an elderly woman, bent with age, selling yams by the roadside. The woman's eyes were tired but kind. Abina, embarrassed by her own shabbiness, hesitated, but the woman offered her a yam without asking for payment. "Eat," she said gently. "We all stumble. Some fall harder than others. But if you learn, you rise stronger." Abina took the yam with trembling hands. She sat beside the woman, savoring the food as if tasting life itself for the first time. Tears streamed down her face, not for hunger alone, but for the humility she had finally begun to embrace. She realized that pride and beauty are fleeting, but kindness, respect, and humility endure. As night deepened and the stars blinked faintly above, Abina whispered a vow into the cold air. "I will not forget this. I will return. I will be better. I will honor those I once scorned, and I will learn the true meaning of life." For the first time, she felt a flicker of hope, a fragile, glowing ember in the darkness. Humility had found her, and though the journey ahead was long and uncertain, she knew that change had begun, and nothing could stop it now. The sun hung low over the horizon, casting long shadows over the village Abina once called home. The same golden savannas and whispering trees now felt foreign, as if they had been waiting for her return, silently judging her absence. The dust kicked up beneath her feet, a humbling reminder of her journey, the long, cold nights, the gnawing hunger, the sharp sting of betrayal, the tears that had cleansed her pride. Abina's heart pounded as she approached her parents' modest hut. She had imagined this moment countless times during her exile, but the reality was far more intimidating. Kofi was tending to his small plot of land, his back bent from years of labor, and Ama carried a basket of vegetables, humming softly to herself. Their heads lifted as they noticed her. For a heartbeat, silence ruled the air, thick with unspoken questions. Ama's voice was soft, questioning, yet cautious. Abina nodded, unable to speak at first. Her throat was tight, not from fear, but from the crushing weight of her shame. She had expected anger, scolding, or perhaps complete rejection, but what met her was stillness and a flicker of hope she had long forgotten. Kofi approached slowly, his weathered eyes searching hers for the truth. "Child, you have returned," he said quietly. "I see. Something has changed." Abina swallowed hard, finding her voice. "Father, mother, I have been foolish. I was proud, arrogant, and blind. I mocked your love, scorned your guidance, and thought the world owed me admiration. I have suffered. I have lost everything, and I am sorry." Her voice cracked on the last word, the confession hanging in the still air. Her parents exchanged a glance, a silent conversation passing between them. Ama's eyes glistened, not with tears of disappointment, but with a quiet, profound relief. "Words alone do not heal Abina," she said gently, her tone kind but firm. "But acknowledgement is the first step." Abina looked around the village, the children she had once mocked, now playing near the riverbank. Neighbors working diligently in their small gardens. Elders sitting in the shade of the great baobab trees. For the first time, humility seeped into her bones, a feeling as foreign as the land she now stood upon. She realized that true respect was not something to be demanded. It had to be earned, through actions, through kindness, and through endless patience. But the villagers were not yet ready to forgive so easily. Whispers followed her like a shadow as she walked. She has returned, but will she change? Her pride was legendary. Can humility truly follow such arrogance? Abena knew she had to prove herself, not with words, but with deeds. Her journey of redemption had only just begun. The next morning, she woke with the first light of dawn. She found Ama in the garden, gathering vegetables for the market. Without a word, Abena began to help, her once proud hands now moving with quiet diligence, gentle and careful. She then assisted Kofi in repairing the fences that protected their crops, lifting heavy wood and mending holes with sweat and humility. Each task was a lesson, a reminder of the value of work, of patience, and of respect for the simple, steady life that had always been her foundation. She learned to find satisfaction not in being seen, but in contributing. Yet, the greatest test awaited her at the village square. A festival had been organized to celebrate the harvest, a time of joy and community. Villagers were preparing for traditional dances, songs, and storytelling. Abena stood at the edge of the crowd, hesitant, an outsider in her own home. The eyes of the people she had once scorned were on her, measuring her, waiting for the old pride to resurface. Could she truly be trusted? Was this change real, or just another performance? An elder, a woman whose wisdom Abena had once dismissed, approached her. Her gaze was sharp, cutting through any pretense. "Do you understand now, child?" she asked, her voice low but clear, "that pride isolates, and humility unites." Abena bowed her head, the gesture coming naturally now, too. She said, her voice trembling but sincere, "I have learned the cost of arrogance. I have felt hunger, shame, and solitude. And I will strive to honor, respect, love, and kindness above all else." The elder nodded slowly, a faint smile breaking through her stern expression. "Actions will speak for you now," she said, and turned back to the festivities. At that night, under the warm glow of lantern light, Abena joined the villagers in dance and song, not at the center, where she once demanded to be, but among them, as one of them. She laughed not to be admired, but to share in the collective joy. She helped a young child tie her hair, carried water for the elders, and listened intently to stories of hardship and wisdom, finding value in their experiences. Each act of service, no matter how small, mended the fragile threads of trust, slowly weaving her back into the tapestry of her community. As the festival reached its peak, Kofi and Ama watched from a distance, a quiet understanding in their eyes. Pride had been broken, but love had endured. Abena had returned, yes, but more importantly, she had returned changed. The villagers, too, softened, recognizing that humility, once truly embraced, could heal old wounds, bridge deep divides, and restore harmony. Abena retired to her hut that night, exhausted but peaceful. The glow of lanterns illuminated her tear-streaked face, a symbol not of sorrow, but of transformation. She had faced the harsh truths of the world and, more importantly, the harsh truths of her own heart. She finally understood that beauty fades, wealth is temporary, but humility, kindness, and respect are eternal. And somewhere deep within, a quiet resolve formed. As strong as the roots of the baobab tree, she would never again let pride blind her. Never again scorn the hands that loved her. And never again forget the painful lessons that had taught her the true value of humility. The dawn broke with a soft golden glow, spilling across the village like a long-awaited blessing. Abena stood at the edge of the river, her eyes fixed on the reflection rippling in the water. For the first time, she didn't see the proud, arrogant girl who had left in search of grandeur. Instead, she saw a young woman tempered by trials, softened by suffering, and awakened by a profound sense of humility. Her eyes, once sharp with vanity, now held the gentle light of understanding. The villagers had gathered for the day's market and festival preparations. Whispers of her return still hung in the air, but they were different now. They carried not scorn, but a cautious curiosity, a quiet hope, and an unspoken challenge. Was this change real? Would it last? With steady but humble steps, Abena approached her parents' hut. Her father, Kofi, was tending the soil. He lifted his head, his movements slow and deliberate. Her mother Ama was preparing food, and her hands stilled mid-task as she saw her daughter. Their eyes met, and in that silent moment, a universe of understanding passed between them. It was a wordless acknowledgement of the long, painful journey she had endured. I have returned, Abina said, her voice soft, carrying none of its former authority. I am not here seeking admiration or applause, but seeking forgiveness and a place among the people I once disrespected. I am no longer the girl you knew. I have learnt what pride costs and what humility gives. Ama stepped forward, her hands trembling as she wrapped her arms around her daughter. We never stopped hoping. Child, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Love does not abandon, even when life's lessons are harsh. You have learned the greatest lesson of all, that respect, kindness, and humility are treasures that no amount of wealth can ever buy. The village elder, the same man who had once warned Abina of her arrogance, approached with a measured, thoughtful pace. He looked at her, his gaze piercing but not unkind. You have faced hunger, isolation, and betrayal, he said, his voice resonating with wisdom. You have felt the sting of pride's consequences. Redemption is not something you can simply claim. It must be earned. But today, your actions have begun to speak louder than any words you could offer. We are witnessing your true transformation. Tears spilled freely down Abina's cheeks as she nodded in acceptance. She didn't try to defend herself or make excuses. She simply got to work. She helped distribute food to the children, their small hands reaching out to her without hesitation. She assisted the elders in arranging the offerings for the festival, listening patiently to their instructions. She offered gentle, sincere words to those she had once hurt with her scorn. Every gesture was a bridge, carefully built to repair the damage her vanity had caused. She learned to listen before she spoke, to give before she received, to serve without any expectation of praise. As the day unfolded, the villagers began to see the depth of her change. It wasn't in her beauty, which had always been there, but in the way she now moved through the world. Her laughter no longer demanded attention. It invited companionship. Her elegance no longer intimidated. It inspired a sense of warmth and care. Slowly, cautiously, the heart of the community began to open to her once more. By evening, the entire village gathered under the sprawling branches of the ancient baobab trees for a night of storytelling, music, and dance. Abina joined in, not taking her place at the center as she would have before, but standing beside the very people she had once mocked. Her hands, once poised only for display, now carried a cup of water for a thirsty child. Her voice, once commanding and sharp, now spoke gently, offering encouragement and comfort. In every single action, she demonstrated that humility, learned through immense hardship, had taken deep root within her soul. Kofi and Ama watched from a distance, their hearts swelling with a mixture of pride and relief. Their daughter had returned, yes, but more importantly, she had returned whole. She was transformed, awakened, and finally at peace. Later that night, Abina knelt by the river again. This time, her reflection was steady, her heart full. She whispered a promise, not to the world, but to herself. I will never again let arrogance rule my life. Children ran to her side, laughing and playing without any fear of mockery. The elders nodded with cautious, but genuine, approval. Old friends returned, their smiles finally replacing the whispers. Even those who had held on to their doubt felt the undeniable truth in her actions. They saw that redemption is not an instant miracle, but a possible, beautiful reality for anyone who chooses to embrace humility. As night fell, and lanterns cast a soft, warm glow across the village, Abina sat beside her parents, the gentle hum of community life surrounding her like a warm blanket. She finally understood that wealth, beauty, and admiration are fleeting shadows. The only things that truly endure are the light of humility, the warmth of love, and the strength of integrity. She been spoiled, proud, and blind. But she had faced the consequences, learnt the lessons, and ultimately chosen the path of true wisdom. In the quiet of the starlit night, the entire village seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief and joy. Abina had been tested by life, tempered by hardship and reborn through understanding. Sheet had discovered the timeless truth that every person, no matter how lost they are in their own pride, can find their way back if they just listen to their conscience, face their mistakes, and embrace the transformative power of humility. And so, under the soft glow of the moonlight, the spoiled daughter who had once brought shame to her family now walked among them with grace, respect, and love. Her journey had ended, not in the riches or admiration she once chased, but in something far, far greater: wisdom, humility, and the quiet, powerful triumph of a transformed heart. Thank you for watching this story unfold with us. If it resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales of transformation and wisdom. We'll see you in the next video.